Hi, I'm Randy Cantrell. Welcome to the Year of the Peer podcast with Leo Batari. This podcast is based on a simple truth. Who you surround yourself with matters. Author and keynote speaker Leo Batari will interview thought leaders from all walks of life who will share how they leverage peer advantage and show you how engaging your peers more purposefully can hold the key to greater success in business and in life. Today's guest is Scott Mordell. Scott has been the CEO of a number of privately held organizations. He has served as YPO CEO for 6 years. YPO is the global platform for chief executives to engage, learn, and grow. YPO members harness the knowledge, influence, and trust of the world's most influential and innovative business leaders to inspire business, personal, family, and community impact. Today, YPO empowers more than 25,000 chief executives in more than 130 countries, diversified among industries and types of businesses. Altogether, YPO member-led companies employ more than 15 million people and generate $6 trillion in annual revenues. We welcome Scott to the Year of the Peer podcast.
Scott, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Leo, and all of your listeners.
Well, you know, this year, as you're aware, we're focused on talking about the fact that who you surround yourself with matters, and it really matters a lot. And I know that your work and the work of YPO is so dedicated to that and making sure the people are surrounded with the right people in the right forums. And, it's really terrific. But what I'd love to do before we get into a deeper dive on YPO is have people get a sense of, who you are and maybe some of the people who influenced you along the way and how you kind of found yourself to be where you are today.
Well, thank you, Leo. Strangely enough, I love what you just said about that, about the people that we surround ourselves with. I've been on a journey that as I look back to it, I find that I've been on a journey to this exact place because I could never have mapped out a journey that would take me to lead YPO and to work with so many incredible people and have friends literally around the world. Could never have envisioned that. It was a series of literally accidental, circumstantial, and people around me kinds of decisions that have really taken me to where I am today, and quite frankly, to where I'm still going as I go forward.
Sure.
I grew up in Michigan in the States, very middle-class kid, grew up with a bunch of brothers, and really just my goal in life was not to be one of my brothers, okay? So just a humble person, came up through the accounting ranks, and actually didn't know what to do, but just wanted to get a job. Growing up in Detroit, it was all about just getting a job. Well, as it turns out, I ended up meeting some people outside of work. I'm actually the friend of my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife. And he really pumped me up. He was very great about asking me questions. He was an entrepreneur, and he saw things in me that I didn't even see because I was just happy to have a job. And that really helped propel me to aspire to go forward. He was a World War II vet, and he ran a small business, but he could see bigger things for me, and I began to see bigger things for me. And that really helped me push myself a little bit differently than I otherwise would have. And beyond that, after college, I've just been really blessed. Wherever I've been, somebody has taken an interest in me. I didn't go seek a mentor. I didn't go seek somebody to help me. I wasn't that smart about it as I am now. But people actually took me under their wing. So the first job I had one of the lead partners in charge really see something in me and really propel me forward. He actually helped me go to graduate school, where when I came out of graduate school, I then went to work for a private industrial group here in Chicago, because I went from Detroit to Chicago, went to Kellogg in Chicago. And wouldn't you know it, this family has 28 different businesses. He's a World War II vet. And he takes an incredible leadership interest in me, okay? Very, very hard to work for. His name is Dick Duchessois, still alive today, one of YPO's oldest members, by the way. But took me under his wing and just taught me things, asking me questions and taught me some military leadership things, but also taught me a lot about the character of leadership. And so then I started working with his son, who's also a YPOer, as it turns out, okay? And the apple never falls far from the tree, but it falls just far enough to make it quite interesting. And beyond that, Craig Duchessois took a different interest in me and started actually providing different opportunities and everything that goes with it. And so, and as I was working these different roles, running a bunch of different businesses for them, leading some controversial legislation on behalf of one of their businesses, a horse racing business, and doing the rest, I was able to interact with fascinating people who were vendors and friends and politicians and business people, all because I was there. And those propelled me to different opportunities. So after 19 years of working for this family, I went out on my own. I was 48 years old and just decided time to not do something for the family and do something for me type opportunity. And I was looking to work with some private equity firms to acquire a service business that had a technology component as a backbone to it. Okay, so I was looking at a company in Kentucky, another one in Atlanta, and the YPO opportunity came available that they were looking for a CEO. And one of the members said, "Scott, you've been a member for a long time. You'd be perfect for this job." And it's like, I don't want to work for a bunch of people who kind of doing this, a bunch of egomaniac business people and everything else. It's like, I don't see that. Okay, I'm just not doing that. And over a long period of interviews, because it was a very exhaustive process, each step made me more interested in the next step. And as I began to meet the members who were in leadership, I began to see this incredible humility, this curiosity, and this sense of service towards something bigger than everybody as a whole. And so each in-person meeting and everything else kind of drew me further and further. And I went from I'll never work there kind of way. That'd be crazy. Anybody who would take that role working for 22 CEOs on their board who changes 1/3 a year is nuts, okay? To, boy, I really want to do this. This is an incredible challenge. I really hope this works out. And it did. And so I've been there for 6 years now. And every day is both frustrating and exhilarating. And I'm a continuous learner, and my eyes are always open, processing. And boy, what a great platform to be meeting, learning, growing, and just creating opportunity. So that's a bit of a summary, kind of kind of a linear path. But I'll let you take it wherever you'd like to go.
No, I'll tell you, I do love the fact that you went through that process and what an impact it had on your lens on YPO. I mean, it completely was transformative, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And I've seen YPO as a member, one of 20-some thousand members at the time. And now to see it from instead of being within the business or within the experience, to work on the experience for everybody, it was just really just eye-opening because YPO is blessed because we've got members in 130 different countries, okay? And so therefore, I naturally look at things through a United States lens, but as I've interacted more and more and more with people from around the world, my lens is much more global now. And I still have that starting point, but I'm much, much more open to considering things in a different way. And that comes out over and over and over again as we interact with people in what we consider a really safe, open environment, which is what we try to create in YPO.
And how did, as I looked at your career, both as CEO and in other roles, you've worked for a lot of different types of businesses. How helpful was that in terms of preparing you for being CEO of YPO?
Oh, just incredible, right? This is a natural time. All of the literature we all read, and people who might be watching the podcast are very, very curious learners as well. I mean, we're all just curious. And so things are happening faster, and long linear planning cycles end up getting broken because things are obsolete before you decide to do them, just the nature it is. And so as a result, there's just this continuing change in movement. And that's exactly what YPO is and what YPO's turned to be. And it really is an innovation community. There's a group in Kellogg Innovation Network, and they did a study and a review for some people up in Norway, and they studied innovation communities. What are the components of a really good innovation community? Okay, and so that's separate from a peer community, separate from a peer leadership organization, and all the rest of that. And you know what? The core principles of what drives innovation is exactly really one-to-one mirror for what we consider the core principles of YPO are. We were never thought of ourselves as equals or similar even in those kinds of capacities. And yet when they did that study, they came back and concluded that nobody scales YPO, nobody scales trust like YPO does. And what a wonderful thing, because innovation, learning, serving curiosity, being vulnerable to ask questions, so to create learning, all require some degree of safety, okay? But they're all necessary parts toward innovation, but also they're necessary elements and the core elements we try to create when we bring peers together, because you learn from the people around you more than anything else.
Well, and hopefully what happens too is when you get CEOs involved in an organization that's committed to building trust, that it makes them that much more effective at building trust for people inside of their own organizations and creating that level of trust. That's essential. The other thing that you brought up and has been common to the guests we've had on the show is that no one has said, I am where I am today because I had a grand plan 30 years ago that brought me to where and everyone speaks to the various accidents and all the things. So you mentioned specifically there were some accidents along the way. Was there one in particular that you wouldn't mind sharing that just gave you a complete turn? I mean, you could argue maybe that the YPO one was that. It was not something you expected to do at the beginning, and then here you are. But didn't know if there was another one that comes to mind.
There's a big one, probably the biggest one, Leo, which is I had come out of Kellogg. I was a finance and marketing major, pretty full of myself as a newly minted MBA, and I went to work with this privately held group, the Duchossois Group in Chicago, and they had 28 different businesses at the time. And it was right at the time the economy was beginning to turn back in '89 and '90. I'm a little bit older than a lot of folks, so I became part of a group to go from business to business. Hi, we're from corporate. We're here to help. We're going to right size your business, and we're going to help you kind of figure this thing out, okay? But I was the snot-nosed MBA part of the duo, okay? And so as we went around from manufacturing business, which is really what I wanted to be and become, coming from Detroit, that was really my sense of mission. We ended up at a horse race track, just recently built by the family at a cost to them, personal cost to them of $200 million US at the time. I mean, it was literally still today. If Disney was going to build a horse race track, this is what it would look like, okay? Just gorgeous. And so we ended up doing some work there. And the owner comes out, Dick Duchossois, I've been working with him, and he comes and says, Scott, I want you to stay here, implement this plan, and make this work. And I'm like flattered because, what MBA doesn't want to become a vice president of finance, very quickly after graduating. But more importantly, it's like, Dick, I joined you to be in manufacturing, okay? This is horse racing. And he looks at me, just really, really straight out, World War II vet, okay? Says, well, I thought I was going to be an attorney. Look what happened to me. So he says, you start on Monday, and we'll give it a go together. We'll see how it works. And so that was totally unplanned. And I'm thinking, how do I go home to Detroit and tell my grandmother that, Scott is working at a horse race track? And in Detroit, didn't have a great reputation. And I just couldn't imagine it. But the idea of working day in and day out with this guy and the people there was too interesting to say no to. And that decision has really just changed the course of my life because I got into leadership sooner than I would have imagined. I got exposure to different demographics than I ever would have imagined. I was doing politics, I was doing media, I was doing management, I was doing all those different things, and community relations and the whole bit, and negotiating with people who train horses for a living, okay? So it was very complicated, but very stimulating, and I think I got 25 years of experience in the 12 that I was in the horse racing business. So it was really a career accelerator for me, as it turned out, in an unlikely way.
I think about experiences like that. And when I got out of college, I had a job that I was supposed to begin with Senator Paul Tsongas, but it was starting in October. And I got out of school in April. I'd gone to school in Florida. We got out a bit earlier. So I had this 6-month period where I'm completely broke. I don't have a car. And so I go into this business of selling cars. And I sold cars for 6 months. And to this day, it remains one of the most valuable experiences I've ever had when you consider the negotiations and also the perspective, because the way people look at car dealerships, and you should also see the way the car dealerships look at the customers who come in. It's a very, very different lens and all of that. So it's really very eye-opening in terms of how the world can look based on where you're standing and what your perspective is on it, But, one of the things that's pretty great, too, is you talked about a lot of the people that influenced you, and yet here you are in a role where you can really do that for so many others. And that's got to be pretty gratifying, I would imagine.
Very much. It's kind of a calling in certain ways. And I think it's, when we call it servant leadership, sometimes people hear the words and it sounds great, but they don't really process it. But whatever I tackle just has to not be about me. It has to be about something bigger. Okay. And I get a lot of reward personally from helping people, from helping the organization, and doing some of the things that don't get big headlines or maybe even attention or credit from me, but I know they're the right things to do. And so for me, when I go home at night, I just that's really part of my reflection as I think these things through. So at YPO, because we are able to do very much that's confidential. In some ways, I'm a lot of people's clergy, right? Because I'm not trying to sell them anything. I'm not trying to upsell them on their membership or do anything like that. I'm sworn to secrecy in our conversations. And I know a lot of people, so therefore, maybe I can make some introductions or whatever else. And so I end up having some really heart-to-heart and person-to-person conversations in ways that I never could have imagined. Working a typical job or being a CEO of a for-profit organization, in my international travels. And so I'm able to get there very quickly with people on every continent, which is quite rewarding. And when I can help, I go home, that's a giant reward. There's no equity for me in my business. There's no stock options. There's no anything. My equity is knowing that I made a difference and had an impact, and it's quite rewarding.
Yeah, I think the way that we kind of define all the currencies we get from our jobs and whatever we're doing in life is so important. And, it gives us that, full perspective of all the value that we're getting. One of the things I would say that I really admire about YPO is that on one hand, it's very global, of course, but it doesn't just operate at 30,000 feet. You've also got very powerful, local engagement and the way your members work together and how they really help one another in very powerful ways. So I'd love for you to talk about kind of that balance of that and how you create that.
Thank you very much. First, a snapshot of the scale of YPO. Okay, so we're 25,000 members, over 25,000 members now. As I mentioned, we're in 130 countries. Adding up all of our members' businesses adds more than 6 trillion US in turnover, and we're evaluating that. They've got almost 20 million employees as you do all of the math, and so the scope of the number of CEOs, the number of spouse partners that they have. There's 55,000 kids in the community because we consider it an entire community. And then all of these employees in the communities where people work, it boils down to more than 460 chapters, more than 3,800 local forums being conducted among members in groups of 7 to 10 people each month, and 55 interest-based networks as we go, more than 800 self-administered groups, and all sorts of other direct from YPO opportunities. We've got mentoring programs, and we've got global conference calls, and we've got other ways to get insights from different things. So our goal is not to be the academic institution that can proclaim what the right answer is, but we're a platform. Our whole point is, look, you become part of our community, and your job is to figure out how to harness the value of all of these other members who are interested in being harness their access, harness their wisdom, harness their support in order for you to be a better person in terms of who you can be as a leader, as a family member, and as a member of your community. And your obligation then is to do the same for everybody else. So there's a reciprocity in the experience, and that's the nature of it. So we've pre-screened people to get into the community, and once you're in, we expect you to go all in. And more importantly, the other members expect you to be all in. And that creates a self-policing kind of experience that people really want. So to your question, to make it local, I was recruited into the Chicago YPO chapter by some other YPOers, and I joined, and I immediately was a member of a chapter that had 100 and some people in it, but also I was encouraged to join a forum, which only had 7 people in it. And then we increased the size of the forum to about 10. And I was part of this international organization. I was part of this chapter, and I was part of this forum.
Got it.
My forum meets every month, and we have done so for more than 21 years since I've been a member. It's been extraordinary. My chapter meets typically once a month, but for a different kind of what we call an education or learning event. And then globally, in YPO, there's more than 700 other events that YPO facilitates to put on. And there's more than 5,000 chapter events that chapter members can go to other chapter events, depending on the circumstance. So my opportunity is very real. It's very monthly with me in terms of what I'm doing. It can be daily. And then as the world expands and as I expand, I've got more and more opportunities. So it's truly global citizen, global thinking, and global access, all the way down to personal access that actually happens on a very personal way.
I think in the forum groups too, you brought up, I think, an important point, that it isn't really about going there to get answers so much. Oftentimes it's really about going there, making sure that you're asking the right question of yourself, that people around you are asking all of the good questions that you may not be asking yourself, and for you to really be able to think about whatever issue or opportunity or whatever it happens to be, in the kind of way that gives you that, I think, rich perspective. So I'd like you to talk about that a little bit. Certainly you've experienced that, as a member, as well as hearing from so many, from countless other members around the world about that experience.
Thank you, Leo. You've hit it, one of the really important nuances of what a peer experience really means, and really what a learning journey is. One of the core tenets of what we do is we're not here to tell you an answer. We being my forum, for you if you're in my forum, and YPO is not here to tell you an answer. And in fact, we have found in our forums that giving advice is actually counterintuitive, because people cannot give explicit advice because they will never know the circumstances and the trade-offs that you're experiencing as well as you do. Right. So what we're finding is that sharing an experience, connecting to somebody's experience and just sharing your experience provides parallels, and said if everybody can share an experience that's similar to, gosh, how do I hire the right CIO, for example, or something like that, having that shared experience actually creates the insights, okay? And what's challenging in society is finding people who will share like that so openly with you, the goods and the bads and what they went through to come to their conclusions. But I draw my own conclusions as a member, and that's much differently than somebody telling me what I should do. And so what you're speaking to is exactly that. It's sharing those experiences, connecting on the similarities, and then me processing them for myself, because I've got a whole bunch of other trade-offs that I'm making about a decision or a situation that I've not been able to share with everybody, and they couldn't know because they haven't been living in my shoes in the time it brought me to talk about the topic that I'm speaking about. So as a result, I'm looking for similarities and differences from those similarities so that I can make my own conclusion. I hope that makes some sense.
It really does. And in fact, what I wanted to ask too is your perspective on advice and kind of the role it plays. Is that something that you believe has always been a part of the way YPO has run forums, or do you think that's evolved in some ways? Do you think it's that is kind of progressed over time a little bit?
I think it's progressed, and it's never absolute, of course. Sometimes people, look, I'm so stuck, I just want somebody to give me some advice, okay? I know it's coming from a good place, but just what should I do? Okay, so of course that happens. But it's really evolved over time, because really advice makes things less safe, okay? Because once, I'm not going to personalize it, but if you were to give me advice that I hadn't solicited, you said, Scott, never wear a blue shirt on a podcast. You look like an idiot, okay? And you were to give me that advice, now I'm feeling like I'm being judged, okay? And as soon as I'm being judged, or I'm not wanting to follow your advice, I'm, one, not wanting to disappoint you, okay? Two, not wanting to be judged. We don't like to be judged, okay? And three, I'm feeling like, oh, now I've got conflicting advice. Now I'm going to make somebody unhappy with my choice. So now I'm thinking about my reaction to the people who gave me the advice more than I'm thinking about my own particular situation. So we have found in our forum protocols to avoid giving advice. We say, don't should on anybody, okay? You should. Don't should on anybody. Because once you're beginning to give advice, you're making the whole dialogue a little bit less safe. We've taken that over the years, since YPO founded Forum, into a recommendation now to say the best way to react to somebody's situation is not to say, hey, that's really interesting, Leo. Have you thought about this, this, or that? Is really to say, that's really interesting, Leo. I had a very similar thing, and here's what I went through. And I walked through my particular situation, and then somebody else does the same. And pretty soon, all of us are reflecting on our own situations instead of trying to solve one person's issue. So once we don't give advice and we all participate in sharing experiences, now the question that one had is actually the same question and issue that 8 are working through, but from different angles. And then when you wrap that up, you actually get more powerful feedback and conclusion. And the person who had the original issue, okay, has much more that she can walk out of the room with and really carry with her.
Now, I think in this idea that I think oftentimes people wonder that, all right, if certain people bring issues and you're only together for so long, maybe we don't get to discuss something that I wanted to talk about. And yet what they don't always realize is that just about every question that comes up in a forum like that is relevant to everybody in some way. And oftentimes someone will present an issue going on in their company and someone will be listening to it and they'll be thinking, that's going on in my company too, and I didn't even identify it as a problem, and I should not think about that. And I think, yeah, that's where this kind of rich conversation and dialogue that people have is so powerful. And to your point too, I think one of the toughest things is making sure that environment is a learning environment, not a judging environment. The more people that it's really about possibilities and perspective and and all those things really, and not just simply something where people are right or wrong or this or that or
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really the model as we look forward to how people are going to learn going forward. But we're seeing with so much change and volatility and machine learning and everything else that the way we learn as human beings and are going to be impactful 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now are really going to be about how do we create connections that the machines can't connect, and how do we create thinking that that we hadn't had before. In this peer community, whether it be a forum, whether it be a local chapter, whether it be a larger group, ends up being probably the most agile form of learning possible because it's in the minute. Okay, here's where I am today. And we could talk from today, and the people I'm with can talk from today. And if we met next week, we can talk about a related issue or similar issue from that moment forward, from that moment. And so unlike the traditional education model, which is I've got a philosophy and a hypothesis, and here's all the study behind it, that's important, but our adaptability is ultimately key. And the peer learning is really the future learning model, where I think we will look more to who we associate with as really our insurance base, our launch base, and our learning base, far more than where I went to school, okay? And as a result, I think it's all about the networks and the peer communities that we work with. And my biggest advice to anybody coming out of college is always hang around with really interesting people, okay? They don't have to be the richest people or the people who are going to get rich and be on TV.
All right.
Always be with people who are going someplace in their lives, okay? They will stimulate you, they will create your opportunities, and you will create opportunities for them because they're just as curious as you are, and they're going to push you. And that's the best thing you can do to propel your life.
Well, I don't think there's any question, and when I look at, what YPO does, and I think about how powerful just being around the right people is. I took this from your website, and you talk about to be a better leader, a CEO, a spouse, a parent, and global citizen, consider YPO, joining YPO. And I'm thinking, well, who wouldn't want to be better at all of those things, right? So, and we don't have to even speak about it specific to joining YPO, but what I guess for me, when I first really started looking at this, in many respects, it was inspired by the idea that when people come together and they recognize how powerful their peers can be, that too few people take advantage of that opportunity in the way they should, yet it's so powerful and it's so effective. So I guess, how can we inspire more CEOs, more emerging leaders, more people at all levels to really understand that, or how to engage others in a way that can just make such a big difference for them?
Thank you. And you and I are so aligned when it comes to kind of the purpose of how this engagement happens. But one of the greatest things you always hear about people when they give their retrospectives of their 6-word advice and all the rest of it is that somehow in business leaders, they're always talking about it's all about the people. okay? That when you think about an organization, what is an organization? It's only got 4 parts, okay? There's some kind of purpose. There's some capital that underlies the purpose. There's a bunch of people who create the capital, who create the purpose, and then there's some processes that the people are supposed to follow. So the biggest variable in any organization, and there's millions of them that we interact with, over the course of our lifetime, is always about the people. And the management quandaries are always about the people. So why wouldn't the biggest insights necessarily have to come from the people? And so in that sense, the YPO is all about this idea that if it's all about the people, then it's not about leadership in and of itself, okay?
Right.
It's about the people who do the leadership. And that's why we often say leadership's a whole person experience, okay? Because when I'm making a business decision, even if it's about pricing and things are going bad at home and one of my kids is unhappy, I got that going on in my mind.
Sure.
When I'm stuck because I've got a fear of something and an issue I'm beginning to decide touches on the irrational aspects of my particular fear that may have been carrying since I was a kid, that becomes part of my leadership. And so as a result, we believe very wholly that it's fair game, if you can make it safe, to allow people to talk about and engage their entire life as part of their leadership journey, because ultimately that's what we bring every single day. You're looking at 55 previous years of something right now today, and tomorrow it'll be 55 years plus 1 day, but I will still be a cumulative person. And that's who are our leaders today. So that's why I think that this idea of thinking more holistically about business, holistically about community engagement, holistically about how we engage the world beyond our country or our state or our community really becomes particularly compelling, because that is where the insights lie as to what motivates everybody.
I think it's going to end up being the competitive advantage. I think people are going to have to seek out others because they're going to realize how necessary it is. I mean, no longer can you just going to haul away in some office by yourself and think you're going to figure it all out. I mean, it's just, there's too much change. There's too much complexity. There and so many moving parts that, something we do and the implications it has, on those around us are, they run too deep for us to just, ignore that. So, but it's kind of interesting to me because I also think about kind of what do you see in terms of what's next? I mean, obviously as one of the, the leaders in the world in terms of the leading forum groups and what you do. And I mean, maybe you could argue there's been some evolution from, just simply providing answers to really sharing experiences and asking good questions and all that. So from your perspective, kind of what's next, do you think, as far as how can our peers engage one another in a way where we can actually extract even greater value for ourselves and contribute to others?
Thank you. And it's a wonderful question. There's so many different ways it's being posed right now. But we're living through, which is a great opportunity, one of the greatest changes that society's ever had. We're going from this information space to this automation space that changes the way humans work and build and grow and can learn. And as a result, we're not quite at the inflection point, but we're right in the middle of it, which means your question is particularly pertinent as to what we do going forward. So things have changed so much. When I was in college and in graduate school, they were all teaching me about things I'm supposed to pay attention to, okay? Now we're in such an information-rich world. Now I need to be thinking about what to ignore because no human person can process it all, okay? And so what a switch in just one business career, now it's figuring out what to ignore, what's real and what's not. What's real and what's not comes from trust in some way, shape, or form. You trust your information. You trust the perspectives that people are sharing. You trust the way that you've looked at the particular situation that you're actually making decisions and acting within what you understand. And what's really particularly important about what's next is, where is our safe space these days? Okay, mm-hmm. I can post randomly on LinkedIn, okay, and I can do the same on Facebook, and I can create small WhatsApp groups and punch things back and forth. But ultimately, in the most visible times of change, the circle of trust needs to get smaller, because that's what humans naturally do. YPO is seeking to expand that circle of trust, okay, on a whole bunch of different ways of being in the organization. So what's next is we need to continue as individuals, expand ourselves beyond what we know. we've got a tracking list of new technologies that are being applied in businesses in different ways, and we're identifying members who are experts at these and who are being successful in their businesses at these, and we're bringing that content into our organization. We need to adapt faster than ever to a lot of the technological change and our business model designs, because we're all getting disrupted. Most of us just don't know how. And so with that humility of spirit and that humility of opportunity is really what's next. So for YPO, making the access to just information and members is as easy as possible. If I'm looking for somebody who might know something about water reclamation in Guatemala, I need to find a way to get to them really, really fast, because I don't have the time to go through a chapter directory and kind of guess who would be the best person in Guatemala. So we're trying to unlock our network using a lot of the technologies that are available faster and faster and faster, and 100% mobile as time goes, of course, as an organization. But for us as human beings, we still want the same things. We want to succeed in business. We want to be loved, right? And we want to have people who are close with us, who feel we have impact and we're meaningful to them. We want to live meaningful careers and meaningful lives. A lot of the core needs are the same. And so the nature of the interaction among the individuals as they go through that is naturally going to have some nuance change. But right now, for us, it's how do we continue to provide a safe space, a safe haven, if you will, where people can engage their vulnerabilities and their curiosities in ways without the judgment, and also in ways that they can be trusted. And so we'll change our tactics as we go, but that's our platform charge, and we'll keep doing it a little bit differently. But we don't need to innovate that too much to say you don't need trust anymore. What you really need is a chip in your head. That's not going to be the case. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and it's growing a little bit all the time. It's still all about the people. So we need to help the people interact with the people in a much better way.
So as we wrap up, if you could let our listeners know how they can find out more about how YPO provides that brand of safe space for people, that would be great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Just go to ypo.org, the website. We've got some materials on there. We've got some videos. We've got some learning. Some of our members are there. You can learn very, very much about that. And chances are, if you're in leadership in any community around, you probably know some YPOers, you just don't know it. We've kept a low profile on purpose to keep things safe. But if you find somebody who's a YPOer, just ask them. They tend to be very, very happy to talk about the topic. But I appreciate the opportunity, Leo, and really appreciate the work you're doing. The previous podcasts have been very insightful. And this journey of focus toward people on people, I think, is truly a calling. And thank you for doing it. Oh,
of course. And, part of what makes the show provide some valuable insights are the guests. And they, let's face it, I just try to ask some questions and get out of the way. And I think with that, regardless of where people come from or what their field of expertise is, it's kind of amazing the common, themes that continue to emerge. So, but I just want to thank you for your leadership in this area. All the best to you and to YPO going forward. And thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you. Good luck to you and all of your listeners and everybody. Thank you for a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today. To learn more about Peer Advantage, to submit questions to Leo and our guest, and to subscribe to the Year of the Peer podcast, please visit us at leobottary.com. It's leobottary.com. This podcast is produced by me, Randy Cantrell, hosted, of course, by Leo Bottary. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod, Vibe Ace, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license.